silent window sees everything unfold. Welcome to Wolfe's Casebook. I am your host, Enigma. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. I appreciate every message. Let's step closer. If you've never watched Nero Wolfe contemplate a window, you've missed a small but instructive spectacle. Most men look through glass to see what's outside. Wolfe looked at glass the way a judge looks at testimony, assuming it was lying until proved otherwise. It was Tuesday, which means two things in that house on West 35th. Fritz Brenner's Sauerbraten was somewhere in the future, and I was somewhere in the present trying to keep that future from being cancelled by whatever madness had turned up at the door. The madness, this time, came packaged as a man in a derby hat that hadn't been fashionable since Calvin Coolidge was thin. No, he was slim, grey at the temples, and carried a narrow leather portfolio like it contained either legal papers or small reptiles. Either way, he hugged it too tightly. I was in the front room, the one with enough books to make you feel undereducated before you sat down. The bell had rung, and I had answered it with the usual reflex, an inch of suspicion and 2 inches of politeness. "Yes," I said. The derby dipped. "Mr. Goodwin?" "That's the name I answer to when I'm awake." He tried a smile and failed, the way a man fails at a puzzle he swore he'd already solved. "My name is Oliver P. Vale. I have an appointment." I let my eyebrows do a slow climb. "With me?" "With Mr. Wolfe." "That's a bold claim. Mr. Wolfe's appointments are like comets, rare, scheduled by fate, and never on time." "Who told you that?" "Mrs. Leitner." That stopped me for half a beat, not because it made sense. Nothing ever makes sense at the door, but because it didn't come with the usual stink of invention. Mrs. Leitner was a name in our neighborhood ledger, and not one you heard casually. She lived across the street in a brownstone that was similar to ours in all the ways that mattered. Brick, dignity, and the conviction that it had seen better people. "All right," I said. "Come in. Don't touch anything that looks expensive." It probably is. He stepped inside like the floor might object to him. I closed the door and indicated the chair with the least chance of collapse. He sat on the edge of it, as if a full commitment to furniture was a moral failing. I went to the office door, opened it, and announced, "A Mr. Oliver Vale claims to have an appointment, courtesy of Mrs. Leitner." From inside, Wolfe's voice came, deep and irritated. "Pui." That's the sound Wolfe made when the universe offered him anything at all. It's his version of small talk. I went in. Wolfe was in his chair, of course, the red leather throne in his office that might as well have had his name carved into it. He had a book open on his lap, but he wasn't reading. His eyes were up, heavy-lidded, and angled toward the window behind my shoulder. If you're picturing Wolfe, picture a man who could have been a Roman senator if Rome had required senators to weigh a quarter ton and despise everything. He had the bulk, the intellect, and the disdain. The only thing he lacked was the toga. And I'm not sure Fritz could have pressed one properly. "What," Wolfe demanded, "does Mrs. Leitner imagine she is doing?" "She imagines she's sending us a client," I said, "or a nuisance. Those two overlap." Wolfe snorted softly. "I have no interest in her imaginings. She has never before presumed to direct a stranger to this house." "Then maybe," I said, "she's discovered a new hobby, like embroidery or panic." Wolfe's eyes didn't move from the window. "Bring him." That was it. No reluctance, no negotiation. Just bring him, which in our world was as close to curiosity as Wolfe ever got without paying for it. When I returned to the front room, Vale stood up too quickly, like he'd been stung by the upholstery. "This way," I told him. We went through the hall, past the kitchen where Fritz's clatter was an assurance that civilization still existed, and into the office. Wolfe sat unmoving, his hands on his lap, and his face composed as if he were waiting for a messenger from the Vatican. Vale hovered, uncertain where to put himself. I gestured him to the chair opposite Wolfe's desk and sat myself at my own desk to the side. Habit. Also, it gave me the right angle to watch both faces, which is half the job. Wolfe's eyes finally left the window long enough to inspect Vale. "Sit," he said. Vale sat. Wolfe's tone remained flat. "You are Oliver Vale?" "Yes, sir." "And Mrs. Leitner directed you here?" "Yes, sir." Wolfe's eyes shifted briefly to the window again. "There's a good-sized one in the office, facing the street. Wolfe rarely likes it. He claims it distracts him. I've always suspected he dislikes the idea that the street might look back." "Why?" Wolfe asked. Vale swallowed. Because of the window." I leaned back slightly, letting my face stay neutral. A client saying window in Wolfe's office was like a man saying fire in a bakery. Interesting, but not automatically profitable. Wolfe's lips compressed. "Explain." Vale's fingers tightened on the portfolio. "Mrs. Leitner has a front parlor with a large window. A bay with panes. It looks directly at your house." Wolfe's eyebrows rose an infinitesimal amount. In Wolfe language, that could mean anything from mild interest to the realization that someone had just insulted his mother. "Yes," Wolfe said. And she has been watching," Vale said, and then rushed on as if speed might make the words less humiliating, not in the vulgar sense, not for amusement. "She believes she saw something. She believes the window, she calls it the window, saw something that involves me." I couldn't help it, and a corner of my mouth twitched. Wolfe noticed everything, but he didn't comment. He merely waited, which is a strategy that drives talkative people to confession. Vale took a breath. "She asked me to come. She said if I did not, she would go to the police." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "The police," he said, as if tasting a spoiled grape. "That is an ugly threat." Vale's voice dropped. "I think she means it." I spoke up. "Mr. Vale, I have to ask. Since we're all friends here, what do you do when you're not being blackmailed by elderly neighbors?" He blinked at me. "I'm the managing director for Haraway and Pierce." That name meant something to me. Not because I kept a financial section under my pillow, but because Haraway and Pierce was the sort of firm that managed money the way surgeons manage organs. Quietly, expensively, and then with a lot of sharp instruments. Wolfe's gaze sharpened a fraction. "Investment management," he said. "Yes." "Then you are accustomed," Wolfe said, "to the idea that people watch." Vale flinched. "Not like this." Wolfe leaned back a millimeter, his version of settling in. "Proceed." Vale opened the portfolio with a carefulness that suggested it held a live insect. He didn't remove papers at first. He simply stared down at them, then up at Wolfe, then at me, as if checking whether we were real. "I didn't do anything criminal," he said. That's the sentence that tells you you're about to hear something that may not be criminal, but will certainly be ugly. "I didn't say you did," Wolfe replied. "I have not even said I will listen. You are consuming my time. Make it worth the consumption." Vale swallowed again. "There is a client, a very important client. The Kinderman family." That name hit like a bell. Kinderman? Old money, foundation boards, and enough influence to make a senator answer his phone politely. "Yes," Wolfe said. "And?" 3 days ago," Vale said, "a file went missing." I sat up a touch. Missing files were Wolfe's bread and butter and also his personal offense. In a house where he kept his orchids as if they were diplomats, the idea of something being out of place was almost obscene. "A file," Wolfe repeated. "From your office?" "Yes, from my private cabinet." "What was in it?" Wolfe asked. Vale hesitated. "Records, correspondence, strategy notes, certain discretionary arrangements." "Discretionary is a word used to perfume corruption," Wolfe said mildly. Vale's face reddened. Not corruption, not in the way you mean. In the way I mean, Wolfe said. It is always corruption. Proceed. Vale forced himself onward. That file, if made public, would ruin us. It would ruin them. It would... He stopped, eyes darting to the window as if it might be listening, then back to Wolfe. Someone wants it used. Someone wants leverage. I said, and Mrs. Leitner's window saw you taking it? No, Vale said quickly. No. She saw someone coming from your side of the street. Late 2 nights ago, she saw him cross toward my building. Wolfe's eyes shifted to me, and in them I saw the faintest flicker of what could have been annoyance or something else. Then he looked back at Vale. And she thinks this involves you, Wolfe said. She thinks it involves your house, Vale corrected. She said... He licked his lips. She said she saw a man exit your front door. Not yours, of course. Not you. But a man. And she said he looked... prepared. Prepared, I repeated. Prepared for what? A picnic? Vale's gaze slid away. Prepared to steal? Wolfe's eyes turned to the window again. It was as if the glass had spoken and Wolfe was deciding whether it was impertinent. Mrs. Leitner is an imaginative woman, Wolfe said, and possibly senile. Vale shook his head too vigorously. She isn't senile. She is very exacting. Exacting, Wolfe murmured. Yes, I remember. She once complained that Fritz's bread deliveries made too much noise. Fritz's bread deliveries made about as much noise as snowfall. Mrs. Leitner had always been exacting, and Wolfe had a personal dislike for her because she treated the neighborhood like a chessboard and believed herself entitled to rearrange the pieces. Vale leaned forward. Mr. Wolfe, I didn't come here because I believe you stole anything. I came because she insists that your household was connected. How? Wolfe demanded. She thinks the man was your operative. I couldn't resist. That's flattering. We don't usually get called operatives. Thugs occasionally. Menaces sometimes. But operative has a nice professional ring. Vale didn't smile. She said if I did not consult you, she would go to Inspector Kramer herself. That did it. Wolfe's head turned slowly toward me. Archie. That single word was a whole paragraph. It meant, the sanctity of my house is being invoked by a woman with an attitude. She has dragged the police into my vicinity. I dislike that. Something must be done. I said, Yes, sir. Wolfe looked back to Vale. Is there, Mr. Vale, he asked, a reason you cannot simply inform the police that your file is missing and allow them to demonstrate their incompetence in public? Vale swallowed. Because if the police examine our offices, they will find more than a missing file. Ah, Wolfe said softly. Corruption, then? No, Vale insisted. Not... He stopped, then changed tack, helpless. The Kindermans would never forgive us for involving the police, and if the file is released, if it is used, my career is finished. My wife... His voice tightened. My wife would leave. She has no tolerance for scandal. I watched him carefully. There was fear in him, but also something else. Pride. Not arrogance, but the brittle kind of pride that makes a man decide he's too important to fall, even when the ground is opening beneath him. Wolfe said, I am not a priest. Confession will not absolve you. I am a detective. I require facts. Vale nodded quickly. Facts. All right. He opened the portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This arrived yesterday. At my home. He held it out. I rose, took it, and brought it to Wolfe. It was a typed note. No letterhead, no signature, the kind of note that screams cowardly confidence. We have what you misplaced. We know who you are. We know what you've done. If you wish to keep your name and the Kinderman name intact, follow instructions. You will be contacted. No dollar amount, no drop location. And just the kind of vague menace that suggests the writer enjoys the feeling of power more than the money. Wolfe read it, expression unchanged, then handed it back to me without looking. "It is not a demand," Wolfe said. "It is an announcement." Vale's eyes widened. "Is that bad?" "It is worse," Wolfe said. "A demand can be negotiated. An announcement is a statement of control." Vale's hands trembled slightly on the arms of the chair. "Then you'll help me." Wolfe didn't answer immediately. He looked at the window again, and I followed his gaze. Outside, the street was winter gray, and the opposite brownstone sat with its curtains drawn like eyelids. Somewhere behind those curtains, Mrs. Leitner's famous bay window waited, clear-eyed and judgmental. Wolfe's voice, when it came, was calm. "And you have brought into proximity with my home the possibility of police intrusion, public disturbance, and the continued meddling of Mrs. Leitner. Those are irritants I do not tolerate." Vale blinked. "So, yes." Wolfe looked back at him. "Not yet. I have not decided." I opened my mouth to say something helpful, like Wolfe, the man's about to faint and bleed on the rug, but Wolfe beat me to it. He said to Vale, "You will tell me precisely who has access to this file, not theoretically, not generally, precisely." Vale nodded rapidly. "And," Wolfe added, "you will describe your relationship with the Kinderman family." Vale hesitated again. Wolfe's eyes hardened. "If you wish me to protect you from scandal, you will not protect me from truth." Vale's face went pale. "It's complicated." "Everything is complicated," Wolfe said. "The difference is whether it is complicated because of circumstance or because of your choices." That landed. Vale sat there, staring at Wolfe as if seeing for the first time that Wolfe was not merely an overweight eccentric in a chair, but an engine of judgment. I watched the window. The street looked back, as it always did, and across it, the unseen bay window in Mrs. Leitner's front parlor sat like a witness that had not yet decided what it would testify to. In that house, nothing was ever just glass. And I had a hunch, an annoying, tingling hunch, that before the week was out, that window was going to make itself everybody's business. Vale's complicated hung in the air like cigar smoke, unwelcome and stubborn. Wolfe regarded him with the placid patience of a man who has never once in his life been hurried successfully. "Mr. Vale," Wolfe said, "you will either elaborate or depart. There is no profitable third condition." Vale's fingers worked on the edge of his portfolio. "The Kindermans," he began, then stopped and cleared his throat, "have assets with us. Managed portfolios, trusts, a foundation endowment. I oversee the relationship. I've overseen it for 6 years. And," Wolfe prompted. "And I was brought in," Vale said carefully, "because I'm discreet." Wolfe's mouth twitched. "You persist in using that word as though it were a virtue." "It is a necessity," Vale said, and now there was a spark of indignation that looked new and almost healthy. "The Kindermans are not merely wealthy, Mr. Wolfe. They are curated. Their public image is a product they maintain. They prefer their affairs handled quietly." "Affairs," Wolfe repeated. "Plural." Vale's eyes flicked to me, then back to Wolfe. There is, an internal matter. Family disagreement. A potential change in trusteeship. A succession issue." "Ah," Wolfe said. "Money with relatives attached. That is always instructive." Vale swallowed. The file contained correspondence, meeting notes, my recommendations, some sensitive discussions with their attorney and with members of the family. "You kept such material in a private cabinet," Wolfe said. "Who had access?" Vale's answer came too quickly. "No one." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. I saved him the trouble. "Mr. Vale, if no one had access, The file would still be there, and we'd all be in the kitchen discussing Fritz's coffee. Try again. Vale's face colored. All right. My assistant has a key. My secretary had a key until last month, and the security chief has master access to all cabinets. And, he stopped. And? Wolfe demanded. And my partner, Mark Harroway. Wolfe sat very still. The Harroway of Harroway and Pierce. Yes. Then you are not merely a managing director, Wolfe said. You are near the top of the pyramid. Vale's jaw tightened, near enough to be crushed if it collapses. Wolfe nodded once, as if confirming an arithmetic sum. Continue. The secretary who had a key until last month. Why was it rescinded? Vale's lips compressed. Because she was dismissed. Dismissed, Wolfe said. For what? Vale hesitated. Wolfe's voice went colder. Mr. Vale. For leaking, Vale said quickly. For talking, for being careless. Her name is Lorna Quayle. Yeah, she was with us for 7 years, and then she began. She began taking calls she shouldn't and meeting people at lunch that weren't clients. And you discovered this, Wolfe said. How? Vale's eyes shifted again toward the window, which was beginning to irritate me. It was like watching a man check the exits in a room where the doors were locked. We have compliance procedures, he said. We monitor communications. She was warned. She didn't stop. Did you report her? I asked. To the regulators? No. His shoulders sagged. We made her sign a severance agreement, non-disclosure, the usual. Wolfe's gaze stayed on him like a weight. And this was sufficient, you thought? It was standard, Vale said, a little defensively. Standard is a synonym for complacent, Wolfe said. What of the assistant? Evan Shule. He's loyal. Vale's voice softened, as if loyalty was something he needed to believe in. Loyalty, Wolfe murmured, is often a matter of price. Vale flinched again. And the security chief is Howard Klein, ex-police, thorough. He has access because he must. And Mr. Harroway, Wolfe said, your partner. What is his temperament? Vale's eyes hardened. Ambitious. That is not a temperament. It is a condition. He wants the firm to expand, Vale said. Acquire smaller practices. Take more risks. He thinks I am... He stopped. Wolfe waited. He thinks I am too cautious with the Kindermans, Vale finished, tight-lipped. Too deferential. He believes we should leverage them. Wolfe lifted his eyebrows. Leverage the Kindermans. That is, how shall I phrase it? Courageous. It's madness, Vale said. And if he's involved, if he took the file, you suspect him, Wolfe said. Vale's mouth opened and closed. I suspect everyone. I can't afford not to. Wolfe looked at the note again, though he wasn't holding it. This message promises contact. Has there been any further communication? No. When did you receive it? Wolfe asked. Yesterday afternoon, around 5, delivered by hand. By whom? I asked. Vale shook his head. I wasn't home. My wife was. She said it was slipped under the door. No knock. Wolfe's eyes returned to the window as if it were a map of the problem. And Mrs. Leitner claims she saw a man leave this house 2 nights ago. Yes, Vale said, and his voice dropped. She said the man left just after 10. He crossed the street. He went toward my building. Wolfe's eyes snapped back. She told you this when? This morning. She summoned me. Vale's cheeks reddened with humiliation at the word. Summoned, Wolfe repeated, savoring the absurdity. Like a vassal. I said, what exactly did she describe? Height? Clothes? Anything useful besides the fact that he had 2 legs and bad intentions? Vale blinked. She said he wore a dark overcoat, a hat, a scarf up. She couldn't see his face. But she said he moved like a man who knew where he was going. That narrows it, I said. We can eliminate tourists and drunks. Wolfe's eyes went to the phone on his desk, then back to Vale. You came here, Wolfe said slowly, because Mrs. Leitner threatened you with the police, and because you believe the presence of my house in her narrative is dangerous. Yes, Vale said. Because if she goes to Inspector Kramer and says your operative stole a file. Wolfe waved a fat hand slightly, as if brushing away a fly. She will embellish. She will insist. She will seek attention, and Inspector Kramer will come here and interrupt my routines. There it was. Not altruism, not justice. Routine. Wolfe's true religion. Archie, Wolfe said. Yes, sir. Go across the street, he said, and speak to Mrs. Leitner. I stared at him. You want me to volunteer to step into that woman's parlor? I want you, Wolfe corrected, to extract from her the precise details of her observation. Observation, I muttered. She observes the way a cat observes a mouse. Wolfe ignored that. Additionally, you will ascertain why she chose today to insert herself. She has always had eyes. Why does she now have a conscience? Vale half rose from his chair. You'll help me. Wolfe regarded him. You have not yet retained me. You are merely occupying my office. That landed, and Vale sank back down. Wolfe continued, You will remain available. You will not communicate with your firm, your partner, your assistant, your wife, or the Kindermans without my permission. Vale blinked. That's impossible. It is necessary, Wolfe said. You have already demonstrated that your standard procedures are inadequate. Vale's hands clenched. My wife will survive an afternoon, Wolfe said. If she cannot, that is a separate tragedy. I stood. All right, I'll go get myself scolded by a window. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Do not be flippant, Archie. I paused, hand on the office door. I'm not being flippant. I'm being brave. Wolfe's lips compressed, which is as close as he gets to humor without signing for it. Go. In the hall, I grabbed my coat from the rack and, out of habit, checked the front room. No one lurking, no strange smells, no missing silver. The brownstone felt normal, which in our line of work is the first symptom of illness. As I opened the front door, the cold slapped me in the face. New York's way of reminding you it doesn't care about your comfort. Across the street, Mrs. Leitner's brownstone stood with its windows like eyes, 2 on the parlor level, 2 above, all of them blank with curtains drawn. I crossed, boots crunching on thin ice, thinking about Wolfe's window fixation. It wasn't paranoia, not exactly. Wolfe didn't fear people. He despised them. But he hated disorder more. And a neighbor with a front row seat to our doorstep counted as disorder. Mrs. Leitner's bell was one of those old brassy ones that sounded like an accusation. I pressed it. A moment later, the door opened an inch, and a face appeared. Sharp, pale, and disapproving. Mrs. Leitner looked like she had been carved from a bar of expensive soap. Mr. Goodwin, she said, as if I were a stain that had returned. Mrs. Leitner, I said, smiling. I hear your window's been busy. Her eyes narrowed. Come in. I stepped into her entryway, which smelled faintly of lavender and stricter morals. She didn't offer my coat a hook. She merely turned and walked as if assuming I would follow, like a dog or a guilty conscience. I followed. When we reached the front parlor, I saw it. The famous bay window, through 3 tall panes that bulged outward toward the street like a ship's prow. In daylight, it would have been handsome. In gray winter noon, it looked like an enormous eye, intent and unblinking. Mrs. Leitner went straight to it and drew back one curtain a fraction, peering out with the satisfaction of someone checking that the world was still misbehaving. You see, she said without turning. I see a window, I told her, and I see you. The rest is still under review. She turned then, and her gaze was as sharp as a letter opener. Your employer, she said, Keeps a den of secrecy. He keeps orchids, I corrected. The secrecy is just a side effect. She ignored that. 2 nights ago, she said, your house, your front door, opened after 10. And that shocked you, I said. Aye, because it's usually after 9 that the vampires come out. Her nostrils flared. Do not mock me. I did not come to this lightly. That was interesting. Mrs. Leitner didn't do anything lightly. She did it heavily, with paperwork. All right, I said, leaning my shoulder casually against the mantel so she'd feel the contrast between her posture and mine. Tell me what you saw. Exact. No embellishment, no poetry. Just the facts. She drew herself up, and for a second I could almost believe she'd been waiting her whole life to testify. Then she said, it was not one man. And just like that, the air in the parlor felt colder than the street outside. Not one man, I repeated carefully, as if the words might crack if I handled them roughly. Then let's start again from the top, Mrs. Leitner, asked she slowly. She didn't like being told how to do anything, but she liked being listened to. That won out. She turned back to the window, drew the curtain another inch, and stared out as if the street were going to reenact the scene on cue. It was late, she said. 10 past 10, perhaps a quarter past. I had finished my correspondence. Of course, I said. I was standing here, she continued, tapping the floor with a slippered foot, because I heard your front door. Our door has a distinctive personality, I said. It creaks. Yes, she snapped. It does. And it opened. I saw a man step out. Describe him. Average height, dark overcoat, hat pulled low. He paused as if listening. I nodded. And then? And then, she said with a small lift of her chin, another man joined him. That got my full attention. From inside our house? No, from the street. He came from the direction of 9th Avenue. He crossed toward your stoop just as the first man stepped out. So, I said, one leaves our house, one approaches it. Yes. And they spoke. Briefly. I could not hear the words, but their heads were close. It was not a greeting, it was an exchange. I pictured it. 2 silhouettes, low voices, the kind of meeting you don't schedule on paper. Then what? The second man handed something to the first. My pulse ticked up. Something small? Yes, an envelope, perhaps, or folded papers. And the first man took it, put it inside his coat. I let that sit for a moment. Then they parted? Yes. The second man went back the way he came. The first crossed the street, toward Mr. Vale's building. There it was, neat and ugly. You're certain it was Mr. Vale's building? She turned on me. I am not blind, Mr. Goodwin. I know where he lives. He has been there for years. Did either man look back? I asked. She hesitated, just a fraction. The first did. Once. Toward this window. That was new. And then he pulled his scarf higher, she said, and walked on. I took a breath. Mrs. Leitner, why did you wait until this morning to act? Her lips thinned. Because I did not know who the man was, only where he went. And last night, I saw Mr. Vale leave his building, she said, early, distracted. He dropped his gloves and did not notice. That's damning, I said solemnly. Careless with gloves. Her eyes flashed. I saw fear. I recognize it. I believed her. Mrs. Leitner recognized everything unpleasant. She collected it. So you called Mr. Vale, I said. I summoned him, she corrected. Of course. And you told him to come to us? Yes. Why? I asked. Why not the police? She sniffed. Because the police are blunt instruments, and because your employer, she glanced toward our brownstone, is a precise one. That surprised me enough to earn a pause. You admire Wolfe? I respect him, she said. He understands order. That might be the nicest thing anyone had ever said about Wolfe without being paid. One more thing, I said. The second man, the one who came from the street. Can you describe him? She frowned, annoyed at the limits of her own memory. Taller than the first, broader. He wore no hat. His hair was light. He moved confidently. Confidently, I echoed. Anyone else around? No, the street was empty. Thank you, I said, straightening. That's very helpful. She eyed me. You will tell Mr. Wolfe. I will, I said, though I can't promise he'll send you a thank you note. I don't require gratitude, she said. I require resolution. I nodded and took my leave before she could assign me a moral obligation. Outside, the cold felt cleaner. I crossed back to the brownstone with my head full of silhouettes and envelopes. Inside, I went straight to the office. Wolfe was exactly where I'd left him, as if time had decided to respect him. Well, he said. I didn't sit. I leaned against my desk and laid it out, clean and chronological. 2 men, 1 exit, 1 approach, an exchange, a crossing toward Vale's building, a glance back. When I finished, Wolfe closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. So, he said, our house was not the origin of the theft. Looks that way, I said. Looks like a handoff. Yes, Wolfe agreed. A transfer of custody. Vale, who had been sitting rigidly in his chair, exhaled sharply. Then I was right. Someone wants it used. Perhaps, Wolfe said. Or perhaps someone wants it hidden, or duplicated, or merely known. Vale's hands clenched. Who was the second man? Wolfe's gaze went to him. We will discover that. But first, who would dare to use my doorstep as a rendezvous? I shrugged. Someone who knew it would draw attention later. Or someone, Wolfe said, who wished Mrs. Leitner to see. That landed hard. Vale's eyes widened. You mean deliberate? Yes, Wolfe said calmly. Mrs. Leitner's window is notorious. Using it as a witness ensures dissemination. Vale swallowed. Then this was staged. Partially, Wolfe said, which suggests intelligence. He reached for the phone. Archie. Yes, sir. Visit Mr. Vale's office. Speak to his assistant, his security chief, and, if possible, his former secretary. I grinned faintly. You want me to stir the pot? I want you, Wolfe corrected, to observe who reacts. And you? I asked. Wolfe settled back. I will consider who profits from spectacle. Vale half rose again. Shouldn't I come? No, Wolfe said. You will do nothing. If you move, you contaminate. Vale sank back, pale but obedient. As I reached for my coat, Wolfe added, One more thing. Mrs. Leitner described the second man as confident, broad, light-haired. Yes. That description, Wolfe said, does not match any member of my household. Good, I said. I'd hate to arrest Fritz. Wolfe ignored that. But it may match someone accustomed to authority. I paused, like a security chief. Or, Wolfe said softly, a partner who believes leverage is a strategy. The pieces were beginning to show their edges. I headed for the door with that pleasant, dangerous feeling you get when the picture is forming, but the last piece hasn't cut you yet. Behind me, Wolfe's voice followed, reflective. Archie. Yes, sir? Windows, he said, are useful things, but they distort as much as they reveal. I nodded. So do people. Outside, the city kept moving, indifferent as ever, but somewhere between Wolfe's chair and Mrs. Leitner's window, a line had been drawn, and somebody had chosen to cross it in plain sight. And Haraway and Pierce occupied a suite on the 12th floor of a building that looked like it had been designed by a man who mistrusted joy. Polished stone, tinted glass, and a lobby that smelled faintly of money being laundered into respectability. I gave the receptionist my name, got the quick once-over that says you don't belong to this tax bracket, and was announced to Oliver Vale's assistant. Evan Shull met me in a corridor lined with framed certificates, degrees, awards, commendations. Enough paper on the walls to make you wonder why anyone inside needed to say a word. Shull was in his early 30s, neat as a pin, with a face that had practiced neutrality until it stuck. His handshake was firm but damp, like a man who shakes hands for a living and hates every one of them. "Mr. Goodwin," he said. "Oliver, Mr. Vale, said you might come." He said it with a tremor, I told him. "Lead the way." We went into Vale's office. It was tasteful, restrained, and chilly, like a hotel room that charges extra for warmth. A mahogany desk, 2 leather chairs, a credenza, and a tall filing cabinet with a lock that looked capable of defending itself. On the wall behind the desk, a framed photograph of Vale with an older man, probably Kinderman, smiling as if philanthropy were a physical asset. Shull noticed my glance. "That's Conrad Kinderman." "I had a feeling," I said. "He looks like a man who never had to learn the price of a hot dog." Shull's mouth tightened, almost a smile. "This is an unfortunate situation." "Unfortunate is when you spill coffee on a quarterly report," I said. "This is a note under the door and a neighbor with binoculars." He blinked. Mrs. Leitner." "She's got a front row seat and a taste for order," I said. "All right, Mr. Shull, let's keep it simple. Who knew about the file?" Shull hesitated. "I knew it existed." "Did you have access?" "Yes," he admitted. "I have keys. I manage Mr. Vale's schedule and certain documents, but I did not take it." I nodded as if I hadn't heard that line 1,000 times. "When did you last see it?" "Friday," he said. "End of day." Mr. Vale asked me to retrieve a different folder from the cabinet. The Kinderman Foundation minutes. The cabinet was locked. I opened it. The file in question was on the second shelf, left side in a red binder. "Red binder," I repeated. "Good. People who notice colors tend to notice details." Shull gave me a quick glance. After that, I didn't go into the cabinet again. On Monday morning, Mr. Vale, he discovered it missing. "And your security chief has master access," I said. "Howard Klein." Shull nodded. "In theory, yes. But he's careful. He logs everything." "In theory," I said. "I'm a ballet dancer." Shull didn't react. His neutrality was high grade. "Where's Klein?" I asked. "In his office, near the security station." "Take me," I said. We walked past glass-walled conference rooms where people were discussing money with the intensity usually reserved for war. Klein's office was smaller, more functional, with monitors on one wall showing camera feeds of hallways and entrances. Klein himself stood when we entered, tall and broad, with pale hair cropped close and the posture of a man who had spent years being watched and decided to watch back harder. He looked at me like he didn't enjoy surprises. Who's this?" "Archie Goodwin," I said, offering my hand. He didn't take it. "I'm with Nero Wolfe." That got a flicker. Recognition, maybe, or annoyance. "What's Wolfe doing in our business?" "Mostly sitting," I said. "Same as always. Mr. Vale is at Wolfe's house." Klein's eyes narrowed. He went to Wolfe. "Seems he likes puzzles with expensive consequences," I said. "So, Howard, I'm told you've got master access to cabinets." Klein's jaw tightened. "I have master keys and strict protocol." "Show me," I said. He hesitated, then turned to a drawer, opened it, and produced a ledger. It wasn't an actual leather-bound book, thank God. It was a clipboard with printed sheets, but it had the same purpose. A priest's record of sins. "Any time a master key is used," he said, "it's recorded. Date, time, reason, signature." I leaned in, so there were entries. Routine maintenance, a stuck lock, an after-hours retrieval. I flipped carefully to the last week and ran my finger down. Friday, 6:12 p.m. Master key used on cabinet to 3B. Lock test. Signed HK. Saturday, nothing. Sunday, nothing. Monday, 8:40 a.m. Master key used on cabinet 3B. Assist MD. Signed HK. Cabinet 3B, I said. That Vale's cabinet? Yes, Klein said stiffly. Cabinets are numbered. And Friday at 6:12, I said. Lock test. Why? Klein's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. Routine. We test locks quarterly. Quarterly, I said. On a Friday evening after most people leave. We do it when it doesn't disrupt operations. That's thoughtful, I said. And Monday morning, assist MD, you helped Vale open it? Yes. Because he discovered the file missing, I said. Klein's nostrils flared. That's correct. I handed the ledger back. Who else touches those keys? No one, Klein said. They remain in a secured box. Only I have the code. Only you, I echoed. And the code is in your head. Yes. Convenient, I said. All right. One more question. Did you see anything unusual Saturday night? Anyone in the building? We have weekend security, he said. Contracted. Patrols. Cameras. And did your cameras catch a man in a dark coat leaving our brownstone at 10 past 10 2 nights ago? I asked blandly. His eyes snapped. What? Just checking your imagination, I said. Forget it. Different building. Klein's gaze held mine, and for a second I felt the faint pressure of a man used to intimidation. Then he looked away, just a fraction too quickly. What about Lorna Quayle? I asked. Former secretary. Klein's mouth tightened. She's gone, fired for cause. Where does she go when she's gone? Shull answered, cautious. We don't know exactly. She left the city, perhaps. She has family in New Jersey. Klein said. We had her sign a confidentiality agreement. If she violates it, we'll pursue. Sure, I said. And if she's holding your missing file, she'll tremble at the thought of a lawsuit while she sells it to the tabloids. Shull flinched at that. Klein didn't. All right, I said. Last person. Mark Harraway. Shull's posture stiffened. Mr. Harraway is in a meeting. With whom? A client. Which client? Shull hesitated. A representative from Kinderman Foundation. That got my attention so fast I nearly smiled. Right now, while Vale's at Wolfe's. Yes, Shull said, and his voice had a thin edge. The meeting was scheduled weeks ago. Of course it was, I said. Schedules are sacred. So is timing when someone wants an alibi. Klein's jaw set. Are you accusing Mr. Harraway? I'm accusing nobody, I said. I'm observing. And right now I'm observing that your partner is meeting the Kindermans while your managing director is hiding on West 35th. Shull swallowed. Mr. Harraway will not appreciate... Mr. Harraway doesn't have to appreciate anything, I said. He can frame his annoyance and hang it next to the certificates. I turned to Klein. Howard, one more thing. The night Mrs. Leitner saw the exchange on our stoop, she described a tall, broad, light-haired man. No hat. Confident? That ring any bells for you? Klein's eyes went flat. A lot of men are tall. And broad, I said. He didn't answer, and I let it go for the moment. You don't squeeze a man like Klein in his own office unless you want a wrestling match, and my suit wasn't built for it. Back in the corridor, I pulled Shull aside. Evan, off the record. Who's scared? His face went pale. Everyone. That's a start, I said. Who's angry? Shull hesitated. Mr. Harraway. About what? About Oliver, Shull said quietly. About his caution, about the Kindermans, about being told no. And Oliver? I asked. Shull's eyes flicked away. Oliver is terrified. Terrified of scandal, I said. Shull swallowed. Terrified of what's in that file. That was better than coffee. I left the office suite and went to a payphone in the lobby. Yes, they still existed if you knew where to look, like honesty, and called the brownstone. Fritz answered, years which meant Wolfe had decided not to be bothered by modern technology. Fritz, it's Archie. Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Wolfe is in the office. Put him on, I said. A moment later, Wolfe's voice came on, impatient. Report. Klein's got master key logs, I said. He used the master on Vale's cabinet Friday evening for a lock test. Then again Monday morning to assist MD when the file was discovered missing. He claims only he has the code. Shull says he saw the file Friday in a red binder. Also, Haraway is currently meeting with a Kinderman representative. Scheduled, they say. Silence on the line for a beat. Then Wolfe said, Interesting. That was Wolfe's way of saying he'd just smelled blood. One more thing, I added. Mrs. Leitner's description of the second man? Tall, broad, light-haired, no hat. Confident, fits Klein better than it fits Haraway, based on the photos I saw of Haraway on the website. Haraway looks slimmer, darker. Klein is practically a poster for ex-police. Another beat. Yes, Wolfe said softly. Authority, as I suggested. What's next? I asked. You will find Lorna Quayle, Wolfe said. I blinked. In New Jersey? Wherever she is, Wolfe said. And Archie, do not neglect the obvious. The file may have been copied rather than stolen. The theft may be theatrical. Sure, I said. A little performance art with reputations. Precisely, Wolfe said. Return when you have something that is not conjecture. He hung up. I stood there in the lobby a moment, watching people sweep through the revolving doors like they had appointments with destiny. Somewhere up on the 12th floor, the Mark Haraway was meeting the Kindermans. Somewhere in New Jersey. Maybe Lorna Quayle was either hiding or laughing. And somewhere between my stoop and Mrs. Leitner's window, a confident man had handed over an envelope like he was passing a baton. The best part was, I could feel the brownstone's piece getting thinner by the hour, and that usually meant someone was about to step inside and make it personal. Finding a fired secretary in the New York orbit is like finding a specific cigarette butt in Times Square. Possible, if you know what you're looking for, but you're going to touch some grime. I started with what Shull had given me. Family in New Jersey, which is the corporate equivalent of, she went somewhere over there, accompanied by a hopeful shrug. And I called a couple of employment agencies that specialize in executive support, because secretaries have a way of surfacing in the same small ponds. And then I called one of my own ponds, Saul Panzer. Saul answered on the second ring, which is what you pay him for. Saul, I said, I'm looking for a woman named Lorna Quayle, former secretary, possibly in Jersey, possibly in hiding, definitely not in a mood to be found. Can you give her a nudge in my direction? What's she done? Saul asked. That depends on who's telling the story, I said. But someone stole, or copied, a sensitive file, and her name is on the short list. I'll see what I can do, Saul said. Description? Late 20s to mid-30s. Professional, smart enough to get fired for being careless, I said. If she's still cashing severance checks. And she's leaving footprints. Saul grunted approval. Give me 2 hours. Don't make it 3, I said. Wolfe's patience doesn't age well. I hung up and headed back to the brownstone to regroup because Wolfe prefers his field reports delivered to his chair, like tribute. On the way, I kept thinking about that exchange on our stoop. If it was theatrical, then the theater needed an audience. Mrs. Leitner was the audience. Vale was the intended panic. But Wolfe was collateral. And Wolfe hates being collateral almost as much as he hates people who chew loudly. When I walked into the front room, Fritz called from the kitchen that coffee was ready. That was a promising sign. Fritz doesn't brew coffee when the household is about to explode unless he intends to buffer the blast with caffeine. I went straight to the office. Wolfe was in his chair, naturally. Vale was still there too, perched like a man afraid that if he shifted, he'd trigger a trap door. Wolfe's eyes moved to me. "Report." "Klein logs his master key use," I said. "He tested Vale's cabinet lock Friday evening after hours. Haraway's meeting a Kinderman representative this morning. I've engaged Saul Panzer to locate Lorna Quayle." Wolfe grunted. "Good." Vale leaned forward. Did you find anything that proves?" "That proves you're not the only one with nerves," I offered. Wolfe cut in. "Mr. Vale, restrain yourself. Anxiety is not evidence." Vale subsided, jaw clenched. Wolfe's gaze drifted, again, to the window. "Archie," he said, "has anyone entered this house today besides you?" I frowned. "No clients, no delivery except bread. Why?" Wolfe's eyes didn't leave me. Because something has been disturbed. That was the phrase that tightens the skin at the back of your neck in that house. Not because we were sentimental about furniture, but because Wolfe's world depends on controlled variables. Disturbance means someone has introduced chaos into the experiment. "What?" I asked. "Come," Wolfe said, and he didn't move. Of course he didn't. He indicated with a finger. I followed the direction and went out to the hall. The disturbance wasn't in the hall, it was in the dining room. Fritz was there, standing by the sideboard with an expression that was polite but offended, like a man who had just discovered someone had used his best towel to wipe a shoe. "Mr. Goodwin," Fritz said, "Mr. Wolfe asked me to show you. It is peculiar." "What is?" I asked. Fritz opened a drawer in the sideboard. Inside, they neatly arranged, were small spiced tins. Wolfe's private indulgence when he felt like tormenting Fritz by suggesting improvements. Fritz did not like improvements suggested by amateurs, even genius ones. One tin sat slightly out of alignment. Barely. But in that house, barely might as well be a siren. "This one," Fritz said, pointing. I lifted it. It felt normal. I unscrewed the lid, careful. Inside was what looked like nutmeg. "It's nutmeg," I said. Fritz's mouth tightened. "Yes, but it is not my nutmeg." I sniffed it. It smelled off, not rancid exactly, but flatter, cheaper, like someone had taken the good stuff and replaced it with grocery store dust. "Someone swapped it," I said. "Yes," Fritz said, voice strained. "And they did not do it well." I replaced the lid. "When did you last check this?" "This morning," Fritz said. After breakfast. I used it." "Use the nutmeg?" I asked. "For Mr. Wolfe's coffee," Fritz said, and there was a quiet fury in him now. "He likes a pinch." I stared at the tin. "Then Wolfe tasted—" "Yes," Fritz said, and he knew. Back in the office, Wolfe's face was impassive, but his eyes had that hard, private gleam they get when someone has violated his rules. "It is not," Wolfe said, "the loss of nutmeg that concerns me." "No," I agreed. "It's the fact that someone was in the house." "Precisely," Wolfe said, and felt entitled to demonstrate it. Vale was pale. "Someone broke in here." Wolfe's voice was mild. "Do not be melodramatic, sir. There are more ways to enter a house than breaking a window." I thought of the front door and the stoop and the exchange. I thought of the possibility that someone had had a key or had been let in. "Say, Fritz," I called toward the hall. "Anyone in the kitchen today? Delivery man, maintenance, anybody you didn't personally approve?" Fritz appeared in the doorway, posture rigid. "Only the bread man, Mr. Goodwin, as always," and he did not enter beyond the kitchen. Wolfe's eyes went to me. "Archie, what does this suggest?" "It suggests," I said slowly, "that someone wants us to know they can get close, that they're not just playing games with Vale, they're touching your house." Wolfe's lip curled faintly. "Yes." Vale swallowed. "But why? Why swap nutmeg?" "To see if we'd notice," I said, "and to prove a point without stealing something that would bring the police." Wolfe nodded once. "A subtle trespass," he said. "A message. One that Fritz would detect and that would reach me." Fritz's face tightened at being made a conduit. But he said nothing. His loyalty to Wolfe is absolute. His patience is not. My phone rang then, and I picked it up with the kind of relief you feel when the universe decides to speak in something besides spice jars. "Goodwin," I said. Saul Panzer's voice came through, brisk. "Lorna Quayle's not in New Jersey." "Where is she?" I asked. "Manhattan," Saul said. "Not hiding very hard, just keeping her head down. She's been using a friend's address, Upper West Side, and she has a new job interview scheduled this afternoon at 2:30. "Where?" I asked. "A small firm on Madison," Saul said, "but she's currently at a coffee shop near 72nd and Columbus. Alone." I glanced at Wolfe. "Got it. Thanks, Saul." I hung up. Wolfe's eyes were on me. "Well?" "Lorna Quayle's on the Upper West Side," I said. Saul has her at a coffee shop right now. Alone. I can be there in 20 minutes. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Go." "And the nutmeg?" I asked. Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Leave it. I want it left exactly as it is. A trap must remain baited." Vale's voice was thin. "A trap for who?" Wolfe looked at him with cool disdain. "For the person who believes this house is a stage and I'm a prop." I stood, grabbed my coat, and headed for the door. As I passed Fritz, he said quietly, "Mr. Goodwin, if someone was in the dining room—" "I know," I said. "They were in the house." Fritz's eyes were dark with offense. "Then they are an enemy." "Fritz," I told him, "in this business, anyone who tampers with a man's nutmeg is looking for a fight." I stepped out into the winter air. On my mind, juggling two targets: a fired secretary sipping coffee like she had no idea she was about to meet my questions, and a trespasser who had just told Wolfe, in the pettiest possible language, that the brownstone was no longer untouchable. And if there's one thing you can count on in Nero Wolfe's world, it's that when the sanctity is breached, the response is never immediate, but it is always decisive. The brownstone settles the way an old ship does after weather. Slowly, with a few creaks, but grateful to still be afloat. By the time Inspector Kramer had escorted his prizes out the door and the last echo of official irritation faded down the steps, the house had resumed its natural rhythm, as if it had merely been holding its breath. Fritz cleared the dining room with quiet efficiency, his dignity restored along with his nutmeg. Wolfe remained in his chair, napkin folded with mathematical care, regarding the final spoonful of custard as if it were a philosophical problem he had already solved. Vale lingered. He stood near the office door, hat in hand, no longer pacing, no longer trembling, just empty in the way men get after discovering how close they came to stepping off a ledge they hadn't known was there. "I don't know how to thank you," he said finally. Wolfe did not look at him. "You can begin by refraining from future stupidity." Vale managed a wan smile. "I suppose I deserve that." "You deserve," Wolfe said, "to reflect on the fact that discretion is not the same as concealment. One preserves integrity, the other corrodes it." Vale nodded slowly. "The Kindermans?" "They will be informed," Wolfe said. "Selectively, Mr. Haraway's ambitions will be curtailed by the law, and Mr. Klein's by incarceration. You will retain your position, provided you adopt transparency as a policy rather than a threat." Vale swallowed. "And the file?" Wolfe's eyes flicked to him at last. "It will remain where it belongs, in obscurity, which is where most power should be kept." Vale straightened. "I won't forget this." "That," Wolfe said, "is unlikely." Vale left then, quietly, with the posture of a man who had aged several years in a day but might live longer for it. When the door closed behind him, the silence was complete. I leaned back in my chair and let it sink in. "You know, Wolfe," Most people would consider this overkill. Calling everyone here, inviting Kramer, using the brownstone like a stage. Yes, Wolfe said. Most people lack confidence. You also risked Mrs. Leitner, I said. She could have complicated things. Wolfe sniffed. Mrs. Leitner complicates the weather. She was predictable. She desires relevance. I gave it to her. Briefly. I grinned. She's probably at her window right now, telling it all about justice. She will dine on that for months, Wolfe said. I consider it an acceptable loss. I glanced toward the window myself. The street outside was quiet, the opposite brownstone dark now, its famous bay window a blank eye at rest. So, I said, let's review. Klein copies the file under cover of routine. Haraway plans to use it for leverage. They stage a handoff on our stoop to manufacture proximity and pressure. Mrs. Leitner obliges. Vale panics, and then someone decides to see how close they can get. So they swap your nutmeg. Yes, Wolfe said. An act of arrogance. You baited them, I said. I invited them, Wolfe corrected. There is a difference. And Lorna Quayle, I asked. She will receive consideration, Wolfe said. She acted from principle, however clumsily. That is a rare commodity. She was lucky, I said. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Luck is merely the residue of preparation. I smiled. You should put that on a plaque. No, Wolfe said. It would encourage people. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the kind earned only after the last piece clicks into place. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere in the city, decisions were being regretted. Wolfe, I said at last, you ever think about moving the desk? So the window's not behind you? Never, he said. Why not? Because, Wolfe said, it is useful to know when one is being watched. I considered that. You don't mind it? I detest it, Wolfe said, which is why it sharpens me. That was Wolfe in a nutshell, turning irritation into fuel. Fritz appeared in the doorway then, hands folded, expression serene once more. Mr. Wolfe, he said. Coffee? Yes, Wolfe said. And this time, properly. Fritz inclined his head and withdrew. I stood, stretching. Well, the brownstone survives another incursion. For now, Wolfe said. I paused at the door. You know, this whole thing started because someone thought your house was just another address. Wolfe's eyes gleamed faintly. A common error. I grinned. They won't make it again. No, Wolfe agreed. They will not. Later, as I stepped out onto the stoop for a breath of cold air, I looked across the street one last time. Mrs. Leitner's curtains were drawn tight, the great window dark and silent. It had watched enough, seen ambition mistake cleverness for wisdom, seen power fumble for control and get caught in its own reflection. Inside, behind me, Nero Wolfe sat immovable in his chair, the brownstone restored to order, not because it had been defended with force, but because it had been understood. And in Wolfe's world, understanding is the only real security system worth installing.